The left has now declared that Donald Trump is some sort of authoritarian fascist for attempting to clean the FBI by appointing somebody like Kash Patel. They're freaking out over Kash Patel because Kash Patel has openly suggested that he's going to come into the FBI and clean out all the dead wood, going to look into the investigations, going to take a much more active role in determining what is investigatable and what is not. The specific reason Donald Trump was elected is because there is so little trust in these so-called impartial institutions. As Harry Enton points out, Americans do not trust the FBI. Here he was yesterday.
If you look here, FBI is doing an excellent or good job. Look at this time trend line. You go back to 2014, right? It was 59% of Americans, then 57% in 2019, 50% in 2022. Look at where we are today. My goodness gracious, just 41% of Americans think the FBI is doing an excellent or good job. That is by far the lowest number this century. Take a look at Republicans. Here we go. Look at this drop. If you thought that, yeah. Oh, geez. Oh, geez. That's a very good word, Kate Baldwin. If you look,
two words.
It's 2 words. The G's was what I was going for. Geez Louise. There's 2 words right there. Among Republicans, is the FBI doing an excellent or good job? This is where you really see the drop off. You go back to 2014. I'm going to come to your side of the screen. It was 62%. 2019, look at that. 46%. 2022, 29%. Now we're tied for the lowest point at this century among Republicans at 26%.
Why do you think that is? That's because of the weaponization of the FBI against Donald Trump. And the response to that will be a cleaning out of the FBI, which will lead the left to believe that the FBI has been weaponized. At which point you have a bit of a constitutional crisis. Because once the impeachment power has basically been done away with, how do you get rid of corrupt politicians at all? No one trusts the law enforcement mechanisms of the United States to do a proper job. And now nobody trusts the elected government to do the proper job because they haven't done the proper job on this sort of stuff for several generations at this point. And so every election becomes a sort of blood sport election. This is why you're going to get pardons from here till the end of time. And this is why, for example, Joe Biden has suggested he had to pardon Hunter Biden. Because after having politicized the FBI and after having politicized the DOJ, the Democrats know full well it can be politicized on the other end. That is why Joe Biden is doing that. You know, the sort of destruction of norms, the destruction of institutions that has happened over the course of the last 20 years, the willingness to abuse these institutions and just use them for your own maximization of power, that has significant downstream effects. It turns every election into a life or death scenario for pretty much everybody. And that is a massive problem. South Korea is just ahead of the curve. South Korea is what it looks like when you have full-scale, open weaponization of law enforcement by one particular party. Now, again, that may be well within the legal structure, and the answer may be worse than the actual question. But this is what happens. You cannot delegate powers that are inherently political to a supposedly objective, nonpartisan branch of the government. You can't do it. This is true in a wide variety of situations in the United States. You've seen this, for example, with regard to gerrymandering. So every so often, there'll be a big controversy in the United States over state legislatures drawing various congressional maps. And the party that's out of power will complain that the gerrymander is unfair to them. And then they will suggest some sort of nonpartisan commission to fix congressional boundaries. And as it turns out, those nonpartisan commissions end up not being nonpartisan at all. They always end up being partisan. And then whoever fills those roles ends up being treated as either an authoritarian or as a hero. The bureaucracy by claiming objectivity, the bureaucracy by claiming nonpartisanship, the bureaucracy by claiming that it is in fact expert and absolutely apolitical, opens itself up wide to charges of precisely the opposite and creates massive constitutional problems. And that's what's happening in South Korea. It's happening across the West. The only solution for it is to minimize the power of these prosecutorial offices to go after corrupt politicians and instead return the question to the people themselves. And this, by the way, is a case that Donald Trump actually made in this election cycle. Donald Trump said in the United States, listen, the question of whether you think I'm corrupt or whether January 6th was a presumptive bar to the presidency, that is not a question for Jack Smith or for the DOJ. That is a question for the American people. And guess what? In a democratic republic, these are always questions for the American people. They always are. But too many democratic republics have abdicated on that question and have decided that instead they're going to appoint a bunch of special prosecutors to somehow police the boundaries of politics. It doesn't work out, and it makes things much, much worse in the end as a general institutional rule. Folks, these sorts of constitutional crises seem to be happening more and more often. But you know what there's no shortage of? That'll be flashy ads from the big wireless carriers offering the latest iPhone for free. Look a little deeper, you'll quickly realize what that means. To qualify, you need to trade in your phone. Not just any phone, but one valued at $1,000. Then you have to sign up for their $100 a month unlimited plan and pay that sneaky $35 activation fee on top of all of that. That's a lot of money for something they call free. Don't fall for the marketing tricks. Pure Talk, my cell phone company, has a much better option. Get a brand new iPhone 14, which comes with all the bells and whistles you actually need. Plus, get unlimited talk, text, and a generous 15 gigs of high-speed data and mobile hotspot capability, all for just $50 a month. How about that? You're paying half the price of what the big guys charge. You still get a new iPhone powered by America's most dependable 5G network. Do this. Go to puretalk.com/Shapiro today. Switching is simple. Plus, when you go to puretalk.com/Shapiro, you get an additional 50% off your first month of coverage. That's puretalk.com/Shapiro for an additional 50% off your very first month. Pure Talk is America's wireless company. Go check them out right now for the special deal. puretalk.com/Shapiro for an additional 50% off your very first month. Okay, meanwhile, President Trump is doing a good thing and he's doing a not so good thing. So the good thing that President Trump is doing is he says that he's going to attend the reopening of Notre Dame in Paris on Saturday, which is his first major outing since winning the election, according to Politico. This is pretty great, actually. I think it's quite wonderful. As I've mentioned, Notre Dame is a wonderful symbol of Western civilization. Obviously, Western civilization was born in the church. Western civilization is a creation, as I write in my book, The Right Side of History, of Jerusalem and Athens. And churches like Notre Dame are an amazing part of that story. The fact that President Trump is going to do that, I think, is a tribute to the history of our civilization. Trump said Monday in a post on Truth Social, quote, President Emmanuel Macron has done a wonderful job ensuring that Notre Dame has been restored to its full level of glory, and even more so, it will be a very special day for all. So that's it. I think that's a great move by President Trump. I think that it is well worthwhile. Well, now to a thing that I don't like either the Biden administration or actually the Trump administration doing. They agree on it. And frankly, I think that they are both wrong. To understand why I think they are both wrong, we have to understand what China is doing on the world stage. So China is flooding the world with cheap goods subsidized by debt right now. According to the Wall Street Journal, a deluge of cheap Chinese goods washing over the developing world is jacking up tensions between China and the global south, complicating Beijing's plans to build alliances as it confronts escalating trade tensions with the United States. Beijing is hoping to unload more of its excess factory production to developing world countries from Indonesia to Pakistan to Brazil. There are a lot of countries that are worried about China undercutting their manufacturing base right now. China also is retaliating against the United States by banning rare mineral exports to the United States. They're apparently going to begin banning that export as an escalation of the trade war between the world's two biggest powers, according to the New York Times. That move comes a day after the Biden administration tightened Chinese access to advanced American technology. The ban signals Beijing's willingness to engage in supply chain warfare by blocking the export of important components used to make valuable products like weaponry and semiconductors. Sales of gallium, germanium, antimony, and so-called super hard materials to the United States would be halted immediately on the grounds they have a dual military and civilian use. The export of graphite would also be subject to stricter review. So again, China is attempting to cut down on the ability of the United States to obtain materials that are necessary in manufacturing. China has been supplying 54% of the germanium used by the United States that is typically used in infrared technology as well as fiber optics. We also have not mined our own gallium used in semiconductors since 1987. Japan supplies 26% of our imports of gallium. China supplies 21%. Now, so why does any of this matter? Well, it matters because the one thing the United States cannot afford is to be economically inefficient at this point. When we're in competition with China, we need to outcompete them. And to outcompete China requires that we actually allow the free flow of goods and services with our allies. So this has taken the form of investments by foreign countries and foreign companies in American products, for example. And that's not a bad thing. It creates American jobs. One of the most obvious examples of this is Nippon Steel, which is a Japanese company attempting to buy U.S. steel. So Joe Biden has been against that. Joe Biden has already said that he doesn't want that deal going through. It's a $14 billion steel deal. Now Donald Trump has said he doesn't want it either. He put out a statement yesterday saying, quote, I am totally against the once great and powerful U.S. steel being bought by a foreign company, in this case, Nippon Steel of Japan. Through a series of tax incentives and tariffs, we will make U.S. steel strong and great again, and it will happen fast. As president, I will block this deal from happening. Buyer beware. Okay, now why do I oppose this? Well, first of all, U.S. Steel is called, just because it's called U.S. Steel doesn't mean it's like owned by the U.S. government or something. It's not like the government is selling a vital American industry to Japan, and that's now all going to be outsourced to Japan. In fact, precisely the opposite. U.S. Steel has been run wildly inefficiently. It's been run really poorly. It's running at a deficit right now. And in fact, if Nippon Steel is unable to buy U.S. Steel, a bunch of plants in the United States are going to simply close because Nippon Steel is going to invest a bunch of new resources that are simply not available right now. And tariffs are not going to solve that problem because it turns out that the United States is a massive net importer of steel. In fact, U.S. Steel is not one of the contracting entities, for example, for the United States military when it comes to the use of steel. As the Foundation for Economic Education points out, when U.S. Steel was formed through a merger in 1901, the United States was the global leader in steel. In recent decades, however, U.S. Steel has fallen behind its competitors, including foreign companies and even domestic companies like Nucor. U.S. Steel faces a number of problems. Its technology is outdated. Capital investment is sorely lacking. Its workforce has shrunk. Several projects have been canceled. Those issues arguably have been exacerbated by our nation's long history of steel protectionism. Protectionism tends in the short term to benefit an industry and in the long term to make it wildly inefficient. U.S. Steel is not one of the 500 top companies in the United States as far as value. It only employs about 20,000 people. It ranks 27th in the world in crude steel output. So Nippon Steel, first of all, Japan is an ally of the United States. Second of all, Nippon Steel was going to introduce technology to U.S. Steel that allows the company to produce the highest quality products for automotive construction and other industries. And the sort of bizarre attempt to block Japan from owning assets in the United States in order to make those assets more efficient, to create more American jobs is strange. We're not talking about China owning U.S. Steel here. The Defense Department doesn't even contract with U.S. Steel. And in fact, the Department of Defense is not like a defense industry. The Department of Defense needs, apparently, according to Scott Lincecum and Alfredo Carrillo Obregon of the Cato Institute, the Department of Defense needs just 3% of domestic steel production to meet its procurement obligations. So, again, it's a bizarre move. A lot of this is political. It's a sop to some of the unions, presumably. But it is not, in fact, a smart economic play, and it makes these industries significantly more inefficient at cost to American taxpayers and consumers. And as I say, it will cost jobs. Are you tired of the lies and the twists of the mainstream media talking points? Yeah, me too. Join me in my newest series, Fact, where I dismantle and bring truth to this tiring mainstream agenda.